I'm Renee Romeo. I'm here to explain to you how to reupholster a sofa. It occurred to me that you might be wondering just how much time I've spent doing this project so far. You've seen a few outfit changes, and that doesn't mean that it took days and days for me to get to this point. It just means that I've been doing other things kind of behind the scenes. If you're thinking in terms of how am I going to fit this in, it's one weekend and then the following weekend, and then your project would be completely wrapped up. I'm about to start working on the decking portion of the sofa, and that's the area on the piece that the cushions sit on top of. I've grabbed my old fabric that I'm reusing, and again I just wanted to note that you can use these cues from the old stitching to line everything up properly. And there's the end. I've noticed a tear in my decking, so I wanted to take a minute to show you how you can go about repairing something like that and not have it be quite noticeable. I'm going to go ahead and trim off any stray threads, so I've done that. And I'll take my piece that I've trimmed off and I'm going to place it underneath it. And then I have my regular sewing machine now because this machine does a zigzag stitch. A zigzag stitch is really the only way that you'll be able to repair this so that it's nice and strong. Now this machine sews in reverse, so I'll do that. So if I go ahead and try to put any pressure on it, by pulling or stretching, it's not going to come apart. So it's really nice and sturdy. I've forgotten to put in my little cushion clip in the very front of the decking. So what I'll do is go back in with my seam ripper, pull a few of the stitches apart. So when it's finished, it's going to look like this. They have a nice little notch here in the front telling me exactly where the middle is. So that was a real help from the previous upholsterer. And get that sewn into place. And it did a perfect job. It's really nice and sturdy. It's not going to come out. I'm starting work on the skirt. I have these little underskirt pieces cut out already, and the way that they're finished on the original piece is they've had a serger machine that finishes all the edges really nicely. I will cut off just the portions that are serged. When I remove the old fabric from this buckram is really stiff, and it's really something that you want to keep. And in this case, we're keeping the buckram facing up, so that you can see exactly where that stitch line is again, and when you line it up with your machine, you'll be able to follow that exact same line. Now that that's done, we can flip this to the back, and we can have that same exact, you can see this wrap around. When you look at the back side of it, there's a little bit of a loop overlap, so that way you won't see any of this buckram from the front of the sofa. And we're going to finish it exactly the same way, but it's just a straight stitch. We're going to take it apart. As long as it's wrapping around to the back side of it, even a little bit, I think that's plenty. So now what I have is I have my front fabric and I have my back fabric. I'm going to go ahead with my scissors and trim everything so that it meets the back of the buckram. So you'll see I'll just follow that line along with my scissors. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. My edge is finished. Now I'm starting work on the larger skirt pieces. I've already clipped off my serged edges on either end, and I removed a length of stitching along the top that is simply there to keep this piece stabilized as you're in the process of stapling it back onto your piece. So I'll go ahead and open it up and show you what's on the inside. On the inside, unlike the smaller skirt pieces, the underskirt pieces, this has an extra piece of fabric. This is a stabilizer fabric. It almost feels like a really stiff piece of felt. And the reason why it's there is because when you go ahead and staple this onto your sofa, there's only one length that's stapled, and that's the very top. So you really do need something in there to stiffen it, to keep it nice and taut looking, and that's what this stabilizer piece is for. So now I have my skirt stitched together along the bottom edge, and I'm about to place the stabilizer on top of it. When this is finished, you'll be flipping this buckram to the back side, so you'll have a nice finished piece. But we flip it this way, and now I have this 1/2 inch seam here, and so the stabilizer needs to be placed just to the right of your stitching. You're going to run that through your machine just like that, and then you'll flip it in this direction. You can see the stitching represented by this rust colored thread on the left, and the stabilizer is placed directly to the right of it, and I'll just go ahead and start stitching. My stabilizer sewn into place. What I'll do from this point is take the buckram and flip it up, exposing that finished seam, and then I'll take the finished fabric, which is the bottom of the skirt, and flip it around, and then maintain this little wrap around of the finished fabric, pull it taut, and then I'll stitch it along the top, and then I'll go ahead and finish the edges with a zigzag stitch, and that'll be it for each and every skirt piece from this point forward. Of sewing that I have to complete is the back cushions on the sofa, and it's a bit like putting a puzzle together, and so I just approach it one little piece at a time. And so the very first thing that I'm going to do is insert the zipper into the very bottom of that cushion, and I do it the exact same way that I would for the seat cushion. I go ahead and turn in the seam on either side of the zipper in on 1/2 inch, and then I'll simply go ahead and sew that in place with a straight stitch on either side. I have my zipper installed, and the way I did that was to secure it along each edge 1/2 inch in. You could sew directly over the zipper to secure both ends. The zipper portion won't go flying at this point. It's nice and secure. I've installed these D-rings, these little straps and D-rings that attach to the box edge of the cushion, and this is what's going to clip in on either side and keep the cushions from moving in one direction or the other. I'm in the process of cutting my welting right now, and the welting is actually a piece of fabric that's been wrapped around this cording piece. You can purchase the cording at your local fabric store and cover it with your own fabric. My fabric that I've chosen is a contrast to the sofa fabric itself, and the reason why I've done that is because I love the look of a roping that you can get purchased at a store that's already done for you. A lot of this comes on custom pieces, and it's very expensive to have done, and it's very expensive to purchase even yourself. So what I've decided to do is purchase a piece of fabric that has a small stripe running through it, and the small stripe, when cut on the bias, is going to look very similar to that real expensive rope cording. And you can probably see in the video that I have already taken a piece and cut it at a 45-degree angle and wrapped it around the cording. And the way that I've done this is I've taken my plain piece of cord and I've wrapped it in between the fabric, and then I've measured out a 1/2 inch seam from that point. In my case, this is going to be 1 3/4 inches wide, and that will give me my 1/2 inch seam that I need to sew in between all of my larger fabric pieces for cushions. So I'm going to get going with that. I've already marked out my fabric. It's on a 45-degree angle, and I'm simply going to start cutting. I need to join these pieces of fabric together to get a longer length of welting to go all the way around the sofa. You want to take your fabric and wrap it around and meet that same exact angle. And when you put this together and sew it in place, you can kind of see it needs a little bit of adjusting. But once you get that adjusted, your fabric pieces will follow that line perfectly. I have my welting, which has that 1/2 inch lip. I have the edge of my fabric. In this case, it's the cushion piece with the zipper on it. And I just wanted to show you how I go ahead and line that up. And if I'm going to begin this, I would lay my piece of welting over the top of the finished fabric, lining up this edge. And then I don't start at the very beginning of the welting. If you can see, I've got like a little bit of a tail here. So I want to leave about 1.5 inches or 2 at the top here, and I'm going to join these two pieces together. So on the previous piece that's already sewn, I'll open up this little tail and I'll clip off this piece of cording. And then I'll take this and I'll trim this pretty close to that. So the cording might end about 1/4 inch below that. So now I'll take my other piece, my new piece that I'm about to sew on. I'll leave maybe 1 inch tail, and I'll clip this cording to match up with the piece that I just cut, which happens to be right here. Now I take the new piece, I'm going to fold it over on the end to give it a finished edge. Then I'll place the older piece inside and then flip it over, and then I'll stitch it down. At this point, I have my seat cushion fabric. I have the boxing for the seat cushion, which has the welting attached to it on both sides. And my semi-finished product here, I have a seat cushion fabric with the box cushion, and then I simply take that and pin it all the way around the edges. The way that I get this positioned in place perfectly is to take my box fabric and I fold it, and I put the two seams together where the zippers are, put those together, and then I can find the middle portions of each end. So this will be the very middle of the back, and this will be the very middle of the front. So I pin those two in place with the fabric facing up in the right direction. So that would just be pinned down in place, like so. I've clipped the welting just a little bit so that I can make a V and really curve around that corner. So once I curve around that corner, I can take this fabric and pull it taut, and I can locate the corner that'll be my upper piece. So I go ahead and mark that with a Sharpie marker on the back side, and then when I sew this all together and I go to place my top fabric on top of it, my corners will line up just perfectly, and the cushion won't kind of be off and askew. I'm about to sew up to this corner, and this is where I've cut out that V notch right at the corner so that this piece of welting underneath can go around that corner really nicely. So I'm lining up my fabric along the right hand edge. You'll be using your zipper foot for this, or if you have a cording foot, go ahead and use that. I stop my machine at the 1/2 inch mark. That's where my next seam is going to be, heading in this direction. So I raise my presser foot and I twist my fabric around into the other direction, pulling my fabric, my corner fabric from underneath, making sure that that's nice and flat, and then I can continue on in this direction. I now have the box sewn to my cushion fabric. I am in the process of putting my top layer on here, and what I'm going to do in order to do that is to make sure that my fabric is lining up in the proper direction. They're both running this way. So I have my fabric, I'll place it on top. If you'll notice, I have opened up my zipper at this point so that I have access to sew. And so I'm just going to go ahead and get my corners and match them up with my little Sharpie marks on the back so that I can pin those in place first. A really good rule of thumb here is to take your scissors and go ahead and cut that little area of welting so that you get that nice V shape, and then place all your corners in place, and then from that point you can go ahead and sew. The next thing I'll do is put all of these various tucks into the back of the cushion. Now this is the facing side, and I was fortunate enough to be able to keep my old cushion facing intact. So I have all of my cues in place, sewn exactly where they're supposed to be sewn, so that I can go ahead and transfer those marks onto my cut piece. So let's quickly examine our cushion, our back cushion that's going to be attached to the back of the sofa. We have a front face. We have the back of that front face. So this would be the actual back of the cushion. Then we have another layer, which is a flap. The flap gets attached to the frame itself. And then we have yet another layer, which is the very backing of the entire unit. So we're going to deal with these one at a time. I have already finished the very front. I've gotten all my tucks into the very front portion, so that part is complete. I have my welting done as well, so that's complete. The next thing I'm going to work on is getting this portion of the back completed, and that's the very back of the cushion. There are a few pieces that need to go together, and I will lay all those out on the table and start pinning those together and then sew them. This is what the back of the cushion looks like when it's all sewn together. It consists of 4 pieces that I've sewn, and now I'm ready to put the flap on top of that. I have the back flap pinned together, and it is also 4 pieces. And I just wanted to point out that this is the point where it's really helpful, all these little labels that we put on when we started taking things apart. I had 2 pins in here with a little message to sew here between 2 arrows, and that helps me to line up these pieces just perfectly when I go ahead and put them together. So I had a label here, and I had a label here as well. And so I'll go ahead and sew these and then get on to actually assembling the back. I've gone ahead and basted the back flap to the back of the cushion, and what that's going to do is it's going to be able to keep things in place for me when I go ahead and put this white back piece on. And this is just to hold the cushion in place and prevent it from kind of moving around. So what I do at this point is just line up everything. I can clearly see the outline here of the stitching, and so I'm just going to be placing this on top and pinning it in place, and then following my line all the way around where my existing stitch marks are. You're looking at the inside of the back cushion. I have my white piece of fabric sewn in place. All of the seams from the finished fabric are on the inside, and then I have my finished seam that you'll see when the piece is stapled to the sofa itself, and then the white side, which is what I had shown you earlier, has my stitching all in place. I have all of the backing sewn together. So the back of the cushion has the flap sewn into place. It has this white backing sewn in. And I'm going to start taking this flap fabric and fold it into the center. Because what I'm going to do is make room for my facing fabric. My facing fabric has the welting sewn in all around the edges, and I've also sewn in the zipper at the bottom piece. So once this is all pinned together, I'll go ahead and make a seam all the way around. So the very last thing that I have to do, I've opened up my zipper, and I have just a gaping hole here in the side that I need to fill. So I have 1 fabric piece left, and I'm going to pin it in place, right sides together, and sew that, and then it will definitely be complete.